Welcome to the Generation Hustle podcast, a show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and culture, all centered around the millennial. I'm your co-host Amin, alongside my buddy Sherston. On today's episode, we talk to Anthony Zhang, a serial entrepreneur and university dropout who built his first company, Envoy Now, while he's a freshman at USC. He has successfully pitched to the likes of Mark Cuban, is a fellow at the prestigious Thiel Foundation, and is also an active angel investor. He has a very unique story, as after suffering through a severe accident, he was left paralyzed from the waist below. Due to his rehab, Envoy Now was now struggling, and his co-founders were ready to quit. After his intense rehab, he actually came back, and not only did he convince his team to stay on board, but he helped Envoy Now grow to record numbers, eventually having it acquired by Joyrun. Today, Anthony is currently revolutionizing the way we view wine by building Vinovest, an investment platform centered around fine wines. We dive deep into topics such as the journey of building a company, what makes an idea successful, and what it's like to be a dropout, and if business schools can actually teach you how to become an entrepreneur. Lastly, we explore Anthony's current business, Vinovest, and why it's making such an impact in the world of alternative investments today. So, let's get right into it.
Hey, Anthony, how's it going?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Doing good. My name is Sherston, by the way. I know I didn't hop into the Gmail conversation there, but I figured I'll meet you here and we'll take it from there.
Good to meet you, man. So how did you and Amon get to know each other?
I actually know him from high school.
High school, yeah.
Yeah, we went to high school together. I don't think we actually hung out that much then. But yeah, we kept in touch. We have kind of the same friend groups and we stayed in the same city. So how are you guys?
Yeah, we just met a couple weeks ago. So hopped on a call about our company, and then things led to this.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I just reached out to him and organically just talked to him and asked if, what Vinovest is all about. Got to know about it, and we're here now, right? So.
Yeah, we just wanted to hop in and understand more of your story, because I felt like when Amin introduced me to the possibility of talking to you, we were like, this is going to be amazing. So we thought we'd start off with kind of just your story from the beginning. Obviously, you've built a couple of successful businesses and sold them as well. So Envoy Now and Know Your VC. So we wanted to get some insight into that entry into the business world and kind of just your progression from the start. So obviously you started Envoy Now while you were in school. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, how that came up, especially while you're at school, and like how you had the idea to work on that.
Yeah, so I started Envoy Now, I think a couple weeks after my freshman year started at USC. Like a lot of college students, we were staying up late. The cafeteria halls would be closing early. The food was far away, and I hear a lot of my friends complaining about being hungry and being like, oh man, I would pay someone $10 if they could bring me a burrito right now. And I was like, really? You would actually do that? I'll go run you a burrito right now if you pay me $10.
Yeah.
And I did that. And a lot of other people were also requesting the same thing. And it started as just like a text-based service. I was like, hey, if you live in this dorm, from the hours of 6 to midnight, I'm just going to make some money on the side and run your deliveries wherever you want. And I was making like almost $100 a night, and other people were like, oh, cool. Can I be a delivery person too? And I was like, sure. That's kind of how it started, and, just grew pretty quickly from that. The main thing was that we were all students, so we knew each other. We had the ID access to be able to get into the right buildings and dorms and cafeterias and libraries, and everything changed when I had the chance to pitch Mark Cuban at our school. And he and his producer gave me $100,000 offer for 10% of my company. I was like, holy shit, if a billionaire like that is valuing my company at $1 million, I should start taking this a lot more seriously. And a few weeks later, I got a call from one of Peter Thiel's program directors asking me if I wanted to apply for the Thiel Fellowship, which is a program that gives students $100,000 to drop out of school and run their company full time.
Yeah.
So here I was in the position of having two billionaires that had given me money to really take this thing full time, I was like, all right, I think this is going to be where the real education starts. I'm going to drop out of school and do this full time. So we were able to grow Envoy Now to a point where it had 22 markets nationwide. We had, thousands of students doing deliveries for us, and, was able to get it acquired by a larger food delivery startup. And that was kind of my stint as an entrepreneur for the first company. Made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot, made a lot of awesome friendships with both investors as well as with employees and with future friends. And that was kind of the journey of the first company.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, that story's awesome. What's it like kind of meeting Mark Cuban and even pitching to Mark Cuban?
He's pretty scary. I mean, he's a big guy. I think he's like 6'2", 6'3", and like he definitely has that demeanor. He's a shark. So if he smells that you're scared or if you're
Right.
nervous, he's definitely going to pounce on that. So I knew that. I just came in a lot more confident than I actually was, and just kind of put on a show, and everyone really loved it and was able to get a deal done.
Awesome.
For sure, yeah. And what I wanted to ask you was how you managed to kind of balance school while you're working on this business, especially as you're scaling up as well. Because obviously that takes a lot of organization and a lot of, it requires you to be headstrong, which we obviously saw in the Mark Cuban interview, because I watched that interview and like your face just didn't move. He was calling you out and your face just didn't change.
Yeah, I had to definitely bluff a little bit that night. And in terms of balancing schoolwork and my business, the good thing that I was going to USC for business, and a lot of my classes were about, business plans or starting your own business or business operations or statistics. And I was actually able to transform a lot of those projects into just working for my company. So I was pretty much just working in class. I'd be leaving class to take calls and things like that. And thankfully, the professors were really, really supportive.
Yeah, they saw your performance as well and how you managed to handle Mark Cuban, so they figure they'll give you a break.
Yeah, thankful for that.
So that was a cool journey, like obviously going from just an idea of delivery to kind of getting a pitch from a billionaire. And so you had a lot of ups and downs throughout this process. And I obviously wanted to touch on one of the bigger ones during this whole sequence of events. Obviously you had an injury of sorts during this process, right?
Yeah, so it was I think about 2.5 years after I founded my first company. I sustained a pretty catastrophic accident where I broke my neck, and through that process damaged my spinal cord. And after that I was in the ICU for about 6 weeks, unable to breathe on my own. I was on a ventilator, unable to move anything, and spent the next about 13 months in rehab, just learning how to breathe again, eat again, just the most basic human tasks. So through that, the business was 100% on the backseat. Had to figure out how to be myself again, and it still is something that I work towards every day, becoming more and more independent. I'm still in a wheelchair today, but I've regained a lot more function and a lot more independence. But the good thing about being an entrepreneur is that you just don't give up, whether it be in personal things or whether it be in business things. And that definitely helped to kind of have that mentality of other people depending on you for being able to come back and rebound and not feel sorry for yourself.
For sure. Yeah. And during that rehab process, like, was there anything that kind of stuck out to you in terms of being resilient and getting back to working on what you love doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps me a lot to have something else, because when it's recovering from a long-term injury like this, like your nerves don't just come back, and your feeling in your body and your muscles don't just come back like a light switch. So on a day-to-day basis, you don't really feel like you're making that much progress. But since I had another thing, another big project like a company to deal with, it gave me a little more balance. I felt like mentally I was able to kind of switch off and be like, all right, finished working out for the day, now I can focus on my business, or vice versa, rather than, being too stuck into one thing and feeling burnt out.
For sure. So like finding a balance between your health and kind of your growth on the side as well, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I mean, it's pretty unique in the sense that you also at the same time had to turn around Envoy. So when you got back from your rehab, that's quite interesting. You had some of the existing founders and team were ready to kind of give up. How do you kind of take that situation, and how do you take that injury, that rehab, all into kind of fruition and kind of tackle that issue now once you're back? You see a struggling company, and what was your like kind of strategy to kind of turn it around?
Yeah, so about I'd say about 4 or 5 months after my injury, got a call from a couple of my co-founders saying that, hey, it's really not doing well. I think we should just return money to our investors and quit. And they wanted to quit. So something inside me is just like, I can't let this happen. I don't think that we've really, seen it through and given it the proper effort. There's a lot of other people depending on us other than just, the 3 founders. So after they left, I called up the rest of our team. I was like, hey, unfortunately, my 2 co-founders have left. But I want to come back, even though I'm still in the hospital, come back as CEO and be able to at least try to get us to a good outcome. I really think our company has value. I really think that we can grow it over the next 6 months to be able to try to get an acquisition. And if we don't get one by the end of the year, at least we can say we tried everything and left it all out on the table. Thankfully, everyone was ready to give, 200%, really, really just push through. And, we had some incredible growth that drove us to be able to talk with a lot of potential acquirers on giving us a good outcome.
Awesome. So in that sense, how do you kind of define a great product market fit? So we know businesses are always trying to grow, but at the end of the day, I think defining value is the most significant thing for any startup. So in your perspective, what's the key kind of element to finding product market fit?
I think it's just talking. I know it is kind of cliche, but like talking to your customers, what's their feedback? What did they find frustrating about their product and what did they like? And, when it came to the point of college students, they're really, really open, they're tweeting or they're putting it on Snapchat or everything like that. So we had a lot of feedback coming everywhere. And when it came to the point where people were actually posting about it, I was being like, hey, I just got some pizza delivered to the library. This is super cool. And putting it on their stories and things like that. I thought that was when we were like, all right, maybe we're onto something. And, students from different colleges were emailing us being like, I want to start this at my college. And, that was definitely the type of validation that we needed to keep pushing forward.
Right. Awesome. I mean, there's also that sense of like having a lot of user feedback, but how do you evaluate what features are most valuable in the sense to take your product to the next step? Because we always have that experience, especially for me, I've worked in startups as well, the whole idea of product group, and those features keep on accumulating, and we want to know which one would kind of be the best moving forward.
Totally. I mean, there's always, as a founder, there's always so many things you want to work on, right? You always are never satisfied with the product, but I think with prioritization, you just got to think of what's the potential impact and what's the effort taken to be able to get that product out the door. So that's something that our team always discusses. It's like, is this high leverage? Is this high effort? Is this medium effort? And, that's how we're able to kind of start triaging and start working on the thing that, we need to work on.
And I guess a word of advice for like maybe our younger folk or entrepreneurs that are just starting out, what would you kind of define as like some of the core foundations that they should kind of be implementing in any successful startup? Is it capital? Is it the human capital? Or is it just that, again, that product market fit and defining the problem in the first place?
I think the main thing is figure out if your solution actually solves the problem. Everyone has an idea and they might be tempted to just like build it and like make it perfect before it's released. But you really just got to like talk to people, and like if your product actually is something that they would use or pay for. I think that's the main thing. Like get whatever you need to do to test, to be able to get to a first paying customer.
Awesome.
For sure, yeah. And like outside of maybe the Knowledge Foundation and things like that, is there any piece of advice that you learned kind of through this progress that you would have liked to have had like right from the beginning? Like obviously you had your injury and you had this process of coming back to the company and bringing it back. So there's a lot that you can learn through all that, but is there anything that you kind of just sat down and you're like, oh man, this would have been so nice to know way back when?
That's a good question, man. I think my word of advice was to know that it's not a linear path. A lot of times you can feel like you're just trying so hard and nothing's coming out on the other end. And for us, it's the same thing, like a lot of groundwork or a lot of testing, and your growth isn't going up or people aren't liking your product and it's not churning, but it's not for nothing. These are all small incremental steps that can really change the trajectory. And once you kind of have that light switch moment, it's awesome. So it's more so on kind of having a long-term mindset, persevering, and knowing that the steps that you're taking are not going to be one for one. It could be 1 for 10 one day, and you can then look back and be like, all right, these are all the steps I did to make it work, and it was worth it in the end.
For sure, yeah. And I like that you touched on the fact that it's more of a long-term mindset, because kind of what I wanted to get into is your next venture, which was Know Your VC. And I think any investor, any entrepreneur, anyone just trying to get into the industry always has those issues where they're looking for capital, they're looking for some backing, and they get a bunch of no's, and it makes you want to give up, right? So having that long-term mindset is obviously really good in terms of being just nonstop and just going for what you want. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was when you were working on Know Your VC, did that play into the idea behind this? Because obviously it's understanding the venture capitalists that are in the industry, and it gives you a background on them. So I feel like it's good to have that, because not every answer is right, is black or white, right? Like because one investor will say no, it doesn't mean your product sucks. There might be more to it behind the scenes. It might be about the investor itself, which is where your company came into play.
Totally. So, I mean, with the founding story of Know Your VC, I had come across some articles that were talking about these VCs who had been sexually harassing or racially discriminating founders. And a couple of them I had spoken to. I'd considered them as investors in my previous company. They didn't end up investing in us, but I'd known them and I had interactions with them. And the fact that I was a guy, or I was, from America, didn't give me those bad experiences. And I thought that wasn't right. And after getting some more feedback with some other founder friends, like, can you believe this? A couple of them actually shared similar horror stories with these investors. And I was like, that's not right. Why don't people know this? And the main common thread was that they were afraid that if they told someone, what benefit would they get, right? Like, they're just the whistleblower, and then other investors might be detracted from wanting to fund their company in the future. So I knew there needed to be a platform that was a safe space for more transparency, for more accountability. So that's why Know Your VC, which is a site for rating angel investors and VCs, was born.
For sure, yeah. And just to add on to that, did you have any pushback from the VC world? Like, were there people that kind of stood out and said, "Hey, you don't get to judge us,"
I was really careful to avoid that, because there have been platforms in the past that were just pretty much just VC bashing sites. They were created with just the founder in mind, and I knew to have actual buy-in in the industry, you needed to make it fair for VCs as well. So we wanted to make it really curated. We were actually verifying every single thing that founders were said. So if a founder was like, hey, this VC pulled a term sheet, we're like, hey, let's see the email record. We're not going to be bashing a VC if they didn't actually do it. And if they did something well, they should be recognized as well. So because of that, we were able to even out the playing field a little bit. And also VCs started adopting it too. They were like going to their portfolio companies and being like, hey, please fill out reviews on me and other portfolio, other VCs that had invested in you, because we want to know if they're good co-investors. We don't want to invest in them if they're going to blow up the whole ship. And that's how we were able to start getting traction.
Right. It almost became the badge, right? Like to almost certify you.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So now you're on to your third venture called Vinovest. So why don't you kind of explain what Vinovest is all about and why you created the platform?
Absolutely. So Vinovest is a platform for people to invest in fine wine. And I got into this after the Envoy Now acquisition. I was just interested in investing for myself. So I was getting into, a little bit of angel investing, looking at some real estate. And I stumbled upon a report saying that fine wine had outpaced the S&P over the past 40 years. And in that time frame, only had 5 down years. I was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. It's really high performing, low correlation asset. And I've always been interested in wine. And I'm like, why don't I just try being a wine investor? Started going at it myself, went through brokers, auctions, even a couple wine funds, but just realized that despite how lucrative this asset class was, it was still so many barriers to entry. Questions like, how do you figure out which wines to purchase for consumption versus investment? Most people don't own wine cellars with like temperature and humidity controlling features. So how do you actually store the wine? And the final thing was, if you had a bottle of wine that appreciated, how do you actually realize your returns? How do you get liquidity for your investment? Which is, I think, a really, really important consideration with any alternative asset. So with Vinovest, we've built out a platform that allows investors to invest in a portfolio of wines. We have an algorithm that can help them choose the right wines for them. They'll also be actively managed by our algorithm for any future buying or selling recommendations. And we handle everything else on the logistics side. So from authenticating the wine, making sure it's in the right condition, from actually storing it, and also having a full insurance policy on it. And then finally, finding buyers and sellers all around the world to make sure that you're getting a fair price for your wine whenever you enter and exit it. So that's in a nutshell what we do. We want to make it really, really easy for anybody, not just ultra wealthy people, to be able to invest in wine.
Yeah, for sure. And if you don't mind me hopping in here, I just want to ask, why do you think that is though? Like even for myself, when this topic came up, I was like, alternative assets, like investing into wine, it was something that it didn't even cross my mind to an extent. So especially with our generation, it's just alternative assets is something that we don't really look at. We look at more concrete and more kind of safe investments, so to speak. So real
equities and real estate market. Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like how like, why do you think that is a case where there's not much known about it?
I think it just happens with experience. After in the stock market, people are like, oh, you should consider some real estate, right? Mm-hmm. After you're in real estate, people are like, look at these other alternatives, right? There's different loans, there's litigation finance, there's startup investing, there's, alternatives like wine and art. So I think it's more so a path and a funnel of people just becoming more and more open to alternative assets. And I think there's a lot of great technology as well as legislation that's allowing for people who are not just accredited investors to invest. And I think that may be historically a big barrier because, angel investing or real estate investing, like you need to be an accredited investor to be able to even get into those assets. But now there's a lot of tech platforms out there that let people with, say, $1,000 be able to invest in a portion of a building, which is, I think, not been done before, at least in the last 10 years.
Right. That's fair.
So with the fact that Vinovest, you do have a two-sided market. One, you have the demand side, having individuals invest on the platform, but the second is obviously the supply side in terms of finding the vineyards to supply the wine itself. How do you kind of establish that platform liquidity per se? And how do you establish the fine line between the supply and the demand?
Totally. So I think with a business like ours, you got to focus on the supply, because if we're not able to provide access to investment worthy wines, why are people going to show up? So that's what we spent most of the early days of the business building, is these relationships, as well as the access to the liquidity of people that are already buying and selling wine, mostly for consumption. The great thing is that the wine market is already huge. People are drinking I don't know how much wine a day right now, especially during COVID times.
Right. Yeah.
But we were able to tap into that, thankfully. And we don't really care if people are buying or selling wine for consumption or investment, as long as we're able to get the best price. So we were able to be aided by kind of the unique dynamics of this market, where it's also a consumable in addition to being an investment.
That's awesome. And then in terms of your growth strategy, so we know that they say that 40 cents of every investment dollar goes back to FANG or like Facebook or Google. In terms of your strategy outside of, say, the general marketing channels, how do you scale beyond that? Like, what's the plans for Vinovest to grow moving forward?
At this stage, it's all about awareness. A lot of people, like both of you, you never really knew wine was investable until I came along. So it's really about education. People really don't know they want it or need it until we tell them. So that's kind of our main goal. And then I think the other cool thing about it is a lot of people are just generally interested in learning more about wine. I think it's been something that's mysterious, but something that a lot of people are drawn to. It's kind of a romantic thing as well. So making sure that our existing user base, they're telling other people about it. It's a lot more sexy than like a stock portfolio. Yeah. So we've gotten a lot of great kind of user generated referrals from our early user base so far.
Yeah, I mean, here, look at Sherston. I told him about it. Now he's going to be signing up, eh?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a try for sure. Maybe I can get wine connoisseur status on there.
There you go. That's awesome.
Awesome. So you also did mention the progression of an entrepreneur or any company. It's never linear, right? And so we all experience failure in some point in time. What in terms of like what you describe your biggest failure while building a business, or biggest failure in terms of strategy, what kind of lesson have you learned from that, and how have you kind of moved forward in terms of applying those learnings?
Awesome question. I mean, there's multiple times a day where I fail, but I'd say in terms of my first company, Envoy Now, we had a ton of demand to expand to new campuses, and there was a period of time where in less than 8 weeks, we went from 8 campuses to 25.
Wow.
And half of them flopped. And we had to actually scale back our footprint, actually figure out a playbook, because what got us from 1 to 8 couldn't get us from 8 to 30. And we didn't really recognize that. We're like, oh, we can just like print, copy and paste. That's really not how it is. So really, really recognizing scaling pains and not hiring too fast, because we had to let go of people that we were really excited about.
Right.
It was definitely a shitty feeling to let them down. So that's what I'd say, something that we definitely failed at in a pretty big way.
Yeah, and then to that point, so you've got the senior teams are always kind of trying to define strategy and what's the next kind of move that we make. At what point do you think do we pull the plug on a specific strategy and assess whether it's making or earning that expected ROI that we originally intended it to have?
Wow. Yeah, I think it really comes down to culture of testing and actual setting, I think, concrete milestones. So before we test anything, we want to see like, all right, how long is it going to take us to get a result? How much is it going to cost us? How hard is it going to be for us to actually implement it? And also be able to set an expectation on a hypothesis. So this way you can clearly, after this experiment is run or after this initiative is run, go back to your team and be like, all right, this was successful for reasons A, B, and C. This was a failure for reasons A, B, and C, but this is what I want to try next. This is why it might be different. And then, then there's that kind of feedback loop. But I think it's really being about discipline on like setting the framework and guidelines before you can start.
Awesome. I think maybe an off-topic question here is, with a lot of companies kind of going remote now, how do you kind of keep that open communication up? I mean, obviously we're on Zoom right now, we're chatting, but do you think like even your company at Vinovest might go completely remote one day? And how do you kind of keep in sync with building strategy and building a company through that method?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question. We were actually remote to start with. So when my co-founder and I got together, we both live in LA, maybe about 4 miles away from each other, but we're like, we are not going to deal with traffic.
Right.
Getting an office on the west side And, we just decided to be remote on day one. And it's an awesome decision. It gives us both more time with our family and loved ones, lets us be more productive. And, I love it. I love it.
I mean, we haven't experienced LA traffic. I mean, I haven't personally been down there,
No,
but I've seen horror stories in terms of what they've described it as.
yeah, I've seen the pictures, especially like during the holidays, and it's like you can't move for like miles. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we've had enough of that. So we're like, this is our company. We get to set the rules. Let's be remote on day one.
For sure. Yeah.
Have you seen any of Elon's tunnels being made or something?
Or actually happening? I've seen some of his flamethrowers. I played around with those a few times.
Okay.
Those are cool.
Awesome.
So I have a kind of question that's kind of going back to entrepreneurship and kind of the status of it right now in the world. So I feel like entrepreneurship has reached an interesting point in this generation, especially where technology has kind of provided everyone the ability to sell, right? You can communicate and reach out to anyone. And so it allows you to reach people and sell to people anywhere and everywhere. So with that being said, a lot of people I feel want to get into business, but they don't understand how to run a business and kind of all of the things that come with it. So I wanted to ask you first, especially since you started a business while you were in school and considered dropping out of school. Do you have an opinion on business school, right? Like the state of business and the state of entrepreneurship in terms of understanding if school actually prepares you for that world?
Yeah. I think if I were to go back again, I would have still gone to college. The biggest value I got out of it is the opportunities, not inside the classroom. I don't think I really learned much in college. Sorry, mom and dad. But I think the most important thing was like the friendships. I met my girlfriend there first week of freshman year. Met some of my best friends there, and because of being a college student, I was able to get a lot of opportunities to grow a business or to be in an environment that encouraged entrepreneurship and learning. And I think so it's the same thing with getting an MBA. It's all about other people who are super active and wanting to start a business. It's really not about what's in the classroom. It's about the networking. It's about the connections you make. And it's about, I think, the excitement of people coming together. So I think that's the value of college if you want to be be an entrepreneur or be your own boss one day.
For sure. Yeah. Would you say that that's something that's not even that's teachable? Just to take your story as an example here, like if you hadn't started Envoy now while you were in school and you just kind of went through and finished your schooling, do you think you would have had that same kind of knowledge and foundation that you had without having started that business?
I don't think I would have. I mean, I would have learned a lot of other things, maybe economics or statistics or other things that I don't really know.
Skipping class.
Yeah, skipping class, got pretty good at that. So yeah, I think it's really just about being around people, because it was just that studying with a couple of friends gave me the idea to do deliveries. And, that's really how I think a lot of early companies are started, is just from problems that you're seeing around the world. And you can't really learn that.
Right. It's just problem solving, right? Finding an issue and finding a solution for that. So on that topic, did you have any moments like that growing up? Like, were there any early signs for you where you were like, hey, this is something that I can fix? Like, because typically people who are really into the entrepreneurial world will have signs from when they were kids, right? Whether it's a lemonade stand or just something. Mm-hmm. So was that something that kind of was on the back of your mind ever? Or was it just kind of like, hey, it's an idea and it worked?
To be honest, I wasn't one of those kids that were like flipping baseball cards or selling lemonade. I was pretty straight edge, thought I was going to be an investment banker, wanted to go to a school that had a good business program. And then this thing just completely flipped my world upside down. For
sure. Yeah. Hey, well, it worked out great, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, you're kind of like an investment banker, but you're an angel investor now. So, I mean, I think it's a better world for you personally, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love having the freedom to work on, I think, a really meaningful problem, providing more opportunities to people. And I would definitely would not trade it for anything else.
Yeah,
Sure.
and so on that point as well, it's the world of tech itself has become like the sexy industry to kind of work in now.
Mhm.
If you kind of look at anyone and like, you ask your friend, "Oh, I want to work at that tech company." Why do you think that is, and where do you kind of think the future of like careers and I guess in that question, like schooling is going to be kind of tailored towards? Is it that lean kind of startup mentality? Again, depending on the program that you're in, but um, why is that? Do you think it's like this sexy thing to do?
Oh man, that's a good question. First of all, I feel pretty lucky that tech is sexy and it's cool, right? Or else I might not have a girlfriend
Oh,
anymore.
okay.
But I think it's also because you see the lifestyle of a lot of these big entrepreneurs. It's something. It's not like athletics where you have to be physically gifted and
Right.
massive to do it, right? Or it's not like investment banking where they'll only take Ivy League kids or Stanford kids. It can be something that like anybody, regardless of where they're from, as long as they have a computer, they can hack away something on a website. So I think it just gives more hope to more people, and that's why I think tech is really hot right now. In terms of schooling, I think also because of that, it's much more open, right? There's so many people selling courses on how you can start a business, whether it be an Amazon drop shipping company or like another sort of become your own boss type of situation. I think there's a lot of different types of education out there, and depending on what type of entrepreneur you want to be. So I think because of that, there's a lot of alternative education that you can use to be able to forward your career in tech or in entrepreneurship.
Okay, awesome. And so I was reading a post that you had on LinkedIn a couple of days ago regarding, so we're going to have a debate here, but
This is a setup.
regarding valuations and raising money. So obviously coming from the finance world, I'm particularly ingrained in the mind that valuations should be based on certain metrics, correct? And you had a post where you mentioned if X or X founder raises X amount of dollars by X investor, that everyone should be happy. And granted, I'm totally cool with that. Like I don't have any problem with that. But here's a recent story that came in the news. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Clubhouse.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so Clubhouse, I think, raised 10 million on a $100 million valuation and is in beta, right? So how would you kind of justify that as being appropriate, given the fact that you have zero revenue? I get the basis of the entrepreneur that's running the program or running the company has been successful before, but in terms of the valuation, kind of how do you justify, say, 100 million at a zero rev or zero run rate, any of that?
Totally. I think with early stage companies in particular, it's really, really hard to judge it on the metrics. It's completely about the team, the timing, and the market. I totally agree that later stage or public companies, you should just be looking at metrics. You don't, of course you care who's running it, but it becomes less important. But at the early stage, it's really just about what someone else is willing to pay. And in that particular case of Clubhouse, they were in a bidding war, right? Probably valuation started at 30 just because it's a entrepreneur who's had multiple exits, has sold to a public company before, and then some other VC was like, hey, I'll pay 50. And then A16C is like, fuck that, I'll pay 100. And that was the deal, right? So I think it's really about a bidding war. Are they worth $100 million today? I don't know, but that's what a really, really accomplished VC paid for it. And they're backing a great team, and we'll see if they can live up to that pretty high standard they set with themselves.
And obviously, there's always that associated risk of it failing, and more often than not, the company is likely to fail. That's just the reality of how businesses work. And then to that topic, what's your kind of philosophy? Because you've invested in a couple of businesses yourself. What's your philosophy around finding the right kind of startup or business to invest in?
Yeah, so I definitely do not claim to be a good angel investor. I mostly just invest in my friends' companies.
Right. Okay.
I want to support them, but also I look at the opportunity. I've been on the entrepreneur side, and I've talked to enough investors to start to know a little bit about what they would think about. So, you assess how big is the market. Are these people I would trust to be able to execute on their vision? That's honestly, to me, the most important thing. And, because a lot of times I'm investing in people that I've had just personal relationships with, that's the biggest thing I'm betting on. I'm like, I don't care what you do. If you pivot a company, like I would still invest in you over anything else.
Right.
And then, things like valuation and metrics at an angel stage, they just matter less to me. Some people may care more, but for me, it's mostly just on the person.
And then what about the shifting mentality? So we know like a lot of startups are inclined to be in growth stage on a consistent basis. But now we're seeing kind of a shift by a lot of individuals to focus on profit. Where do you kind of sit on that fence?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for profit. Like you want to build a real company on day one. And, that's a big thing with my co-founder. Like when we're thinking about this business, we're like, I don't want it to be a business where we need 1 million users before we can like flip a switch and have enough scale. Like some businesses have to be that way. Like my food delivery business, we were losing money on all of our, on every single order because we needed to get the majority of the market first. It was a land grab situation and we were burning a ton of money. And all of these food delivery apps still are burning a ton of money because they're competing with each other. For us, we didn't need to have that to grow. And Vinovest makes money on every single customer we bring in. And that's just the type of business that I want to run because I can sleep better at night now.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to look at, hey, my 18-month run rate is running out. So.
Yeah, exactly. The stability.
Yeah, we're more in control of our own destiny, which feels great.
Awesome. So I guess now we're into the rapid fire questions to end off the podcast here. So
right.
I'm going to have Shearston kind of lead this and go for it, buddy.
Yeah, for sure. And this is kind of just to get the fun side of you because I feel like we grilled you about your business side. So we want to understand Anthony, the real Anthony.
All right.
So I'm going to just toss questions at you and I want you to answer the first thing that comes to mind.
Cool. That sounds good.
All right. So what is your favorite book of all time?
Favorite book of all time? I would say 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Yes, that's my favorite book too.
Interesting. I'm going to check this out.
I read it a lot. I think it's awesome. And it really is that such an exciting mentality of like going from nothing to something. And I think it's really, really cool. Whether it's entrepreneurship or not, everybody always starts something at some point in their life. So that's why I really love it.
Fair enough. Do you have a reading philosophy, by the way, like a certain number of books a month or anything like that?
No, I don't have time for that. I just speak when I can.
Yeah, you are super busy. So next question. How do you like to unwind after a long day? Like what's your go-to after a terrible day, just going home? What are you looking forward to?
I'm lucky to live in California. I love just looking, at the sunset or just being outside. Usually it's perfect weather and just like hanging out with my girlfriend and having a nice glass of wine.
Yeah, we're just starting to get sunshine. So we almost forgot what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, we always live in like 6 months of snow, so.
Oof.
It's crazy. So next question here is, what is your go-to glass of wine?
Ooh, okay. I'd say recently I've really been enjoying Syrahs. So, especially in the summer, I'm doing a lot of grilling. I think grilled meats and veggies pair really well with a nice Syrah. So that's what I'd say my go-to is right now.
That's your go-to. Awesome. Okay, so from wine to food, I want to ask you a question about pizza. Do you like pineapple on your pizza?
Oof. I wouldn't say I'd order pineapple on a pizza, but I'm not going to judge someone who does it. I get the appeal.
That's a cop-out answer. You got to say, you got to be, serious with it.
Yes, I eat pineapple and ham on pizza. So I'm in that camp.
I'm the only one here that doesn't like it.
I'm with you. He wanted to cancel this whole podcast
honestly,
as soon as I told him I like pineapple on pizza.
And last question, who's your most significant role model, business and in personal life?
Wow. Honestly, I gotta say my girlfriend. So, we got to know each other when we were both 18. We went through that accident where she actually dropped out of school to completely take care of me.
Wow.
So every single night in the ICU, like she was sitting on a chair, sleeping, and, just being right there next to me. And, that this is the type of injury that completely changes a relation dynamic, completely changes everything else, definitely had a lot of tough times, and she got me through it. Like, I would say that she's like my most trusted like business advisor as well. She has probably prevented me from starting a bunch of shitty company ideas too, because I'll just run them by her. She's like, "That's so stupid. Why would you say that?"
Yeah.
And also just on bigger decisions and in life. So, I'd say she's definitely my role model.
Sweet.
Hey, we're glad she was there for you like that, because we're interested to see what other businesses you're going to keep exploring and introducing us to here.
Yeah, she's an awesome woman.
That's awesome. I mean, so thank you, Anthony. I mean, this was an amazing conversation. I think a lot of us here learned quite a breadth of things in terms of your mentality, just the hustle that you have given everything that happened. So one, I commend you on that, and commend you on continuing to go hard in terms of entrepreneurship. And obviously, it was great having touch points in terms of the startup world, because it's something a lot of millennials are interested in today, and a lot of people don't get the real exposure of what's out there.
For sure. Yeah. And just, that's what we wanted. We wanted that insight from someone like you who's kind of been through that process. So we appreciate your time here. Did you have any questions at all for us?
No, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the convo, and, hopefully we can have many more in the future.
Yeah, awesome. And here's a quick little shout out. Thanks for helping my girlfriend as well. She was having a bit of a banking issue, so not sure if you remember.
Yeah.
That's my girlfriend.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
So
cool.
I told her about it, and then a week later, she's like, "I'm gonna put my money in." So
Perfect.
awesome.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Take care of yourself.
Awesome. Sweet.
All right, take care, buddy.